Why do you want attention now, cat? Really? Fluffy kitten. That's the sound of a wolf putting away his snacks. Very tasty. And healthy, supposedly. Look! My going live there went out. Huzzah! Hey, look, I've got lurkers. Well, I had people join while I was out, so. Bum, 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 ba, da, ba, da, bum, bum, ba, da. And that went live, cool. It's time to play the music. It's time to kick my browser because it did not start with the rest of the world. Bum 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 bum. Okay. Do I have sound? Oh, my. I've got the panel muted. Duh. I do have sound. Oh, there it is. I remember shrinking me to fix it. Yep. Yeah. There you go. So, how was Turkey Day? Did you gobble it all up? I know I ate way too much. Let's see, we're starting in chapter 10 today. How many other people are starting right now? I mean, honestly. Oh, you wouldn't think a Thursday night would be that busy. You'd be amazed. Oh, I was taking a drink and my camera did not like that. Not one bit. And Critical Role is going on right now. Snuffy's on. Wonderfully Cute Whale Bow. Vex is on. Ronnie Candy is still on. I wonder what it would be like to get their following. And first Pokemon message from Jilbur. It has escaped, though it never appeared in my chat. But oh well. If I keep looking over to the side, it's because I'm literally looking at the chat messages. But anyway, Dracula tonight. Yay! More of me trying to read English. But that also means only 6 days until I do the werewolf thing. Yeah. The chat chooses the pathway we go on Werewolf the Masquerade. Well, not Werewolf the Masquerade. Werewolf the Apocalypse. It's Vampire the Masquerade. It's all the same freaking game company. Hey, Werewolf the Apocalypse. Heart of the Forest. Hopefully I'll have plenty of chatters in there to help me make the way through it. Because honestly, the way I did was pretty much predictable for me. Because I'm a third, and yeah, so I hope you crazy cubs are there for it, because, well, it'd be nice to have people. Okay, well, we're at 5 minutes. Give it a little while longer to see if anyone comes in to give us a listen. I will get my OBS open and I will look to make sure everything's set up for the next screen. Yes, yes it is. Cool. So yep, okay. There's good. Yep, there's good. Anyway, found out that I can actually crop out sections where I'm supposed to be, and I will vanish off the screen if I don't pay attention. But hey, hopefully I won't vanish, because vanishing will be bad. When I first started cropping everything, I completely panicked because I cropped enough that I did vanish from my screen, and I reset my entire thing. So, panic mode set in. But anyway, hope you all had a great Thanksgiving in the States, and hope you all had a great week everywhere else in the world. But yeah, that's how everyone's doing. But from what I can see, everyone must be doing cool because they're not here. Anyway, we are starting in chapter 10 of Dracula, which is still in like correspondence letters between the main characters. Dracula has uh, enjoyed Lucy's company way too many times already, but we don't know what's causing it yet. So, oh, model spaz. Sorry, let me blow my nose. So, it is 8 minutes in, so we're still going. Bopping. Yeah, we're bopping. If anyone has any music suggestions on what I can put in here, I mean, I'm kind of eclectic, so my vibe is all over the place. And not sure if I want like just do smooth jazz or whatnot, and you know, get out my own bass and just record myself playing whatever the hell I feel like. Because I would probably do that. Although I'm pretty sure my bass is drastically out of tune. It's been in a cold room and a box for a while. Which is why I've got the smaller bass on my Throne account. So if you want to pitch in to get me a little plunker, that'd be great. But not going to force anyone to do anything. But in the meantime, let's go over to the reading screen. Wahahaha. Welcome to my library. Well, Dracula has a considerable library in his castle. I mean, the book goes into detail about him learning, but since we are here, and let's see, we've got less than a minute. I need to I don't have that message to pin. Where is it? I need to It's not a current one. Ah, I will copy and paste it so I can pin it. Boop. Okay. Message is pinned. Cool. Manually unpin at the end of spin. Cool. Okay. That's for myself. Okay. So message is pinned. We are 10 minutes in. It is time to read. I do like that Captain goes, sorry if I don't respond right away. I'm either doing a storyteller reading or staring too intensely at a game. Because I only have one monitor and I can't see everything that goes on. So I apologize ahead of time. But let's get into the story, shall we? It is 12 minutes in, so we might as well. Chapter 10. Letter. Dr. Seward to the Honorable Arthur Holmwood. 6th September. My dear Art, my news today is not so good. Lucy this morning had gone back a bit. There is, however, one good thing which has arisen from it. Mrs. Westerner was naturally anxious concerning Lucy, and has consulted me professionally about her. I took advantage of the opportunity, and told her that my old master, Van Helsing, the great specialist, was coming to stay with me, and that I would put her in his charge conjointly with myself. So now we can come and go without alarming her unduly. For a shock to her would mean sudden death, and this, in Lucy's weak condition, might be disastrous to her. We are hedged in the difficulties, all of us, my poor fellow, but, please God, we shall come through them all right. If any need, I shall write, so that, if you do not hear from me, take it for granted that I am simply waiting for news. In haste, yours ever, John Seward. Dr. Seward's Diary. 7th September. The first thing Van Helsing said to me when we met at the Liverpool Street was, "Have you anything to your young friend, the lover of her?" "No," I said. "I waited till I had seen you, as I said in my telegram. I wrote him a letter simply telling him that you were coming, and Miss Westerner was not so well, and that I should let him know if need be." "Right, my friend," he said. "Quite right. Better he not know as yet. Perhaps we shall never know. I pray so. But if it be needed, then he shall know all. And, my good friend John, let me caution you. You deal with the madmen. All men are mad in some way or the other, and inasmuch as you deal discreetly with your madmen, so deal with God's madmen, too. The rest of the world. You tell not your madmen what you do, nor why you do it. You tell them not what you think. So you shall keep knowledge in its place, where it may rest, where it may gather its kind around it and breed. You and I shall keep as yet what we know here, and here." He touched me on the heart and on the forehead, and then touched himself the same way. "I have for myself thoughts at the present. Later I shall unfold to you." "Why not now?" I asked. "It may do some good. We may arrive at some decision." He stopped and looked at me and said, "My friend John, when the corn is grown, even before it has ripened, while the milk of its mother earth is in him, and the sunshine has not yet begun to paint him with its gold, the husbandman he pull the ear and rub it between his rough hands, and blow away the green chaff, and say to you, 'Look, he's good corn. He will make a good crop when the time comes.'" I did not see the application, and told him so. For reply, he reached over and took my ear in his hand and pulled it playfully, as he used to long ago during the lectures, and said, "The good husbandman tell you so then he knows, but not till then. But you do not find the good husbandman dig up his planted corn to see if he grow. That is for the children who play at husbandry, and not for those who take it as the work of their life. See you now, friend John. I have sown my corn, and nature has her work to do in making it sprout, if he sprout at all. There is some promise, and I wait till the ear begins to swell," he broke off, for he evidently saw that I understood. Then he went on, and very gravely, "You were always a careful student, and your casebook was ever more full than the rest. You were only student then. Now you are master, and I trust that good habits have not failed. Remember, my friend, that knowledge is stronger than memory, and we should not trust the weaker. Even if you have not kept the good practice, let me tell you that this case of our dear Miss is one that may be, mind, I say may be, of such interest to us and others that all the rest may not make him kick the beam, as your people say. Take then good note of it. Nothing is too small. I counsel you, put down in record even your doubts and surmises. Hereafter it may be of interest to you to see how true you guess. We learn from failure, not from success." When I described Lucy's symptoms, the same as before, but infinitely more marked, he looked very grave, but said nothing. He took with him a bag in which were many instruments and drugs. "The ghastly paraphernalia of our beneficial trade," as he once called, in one of his lectures, the equipment of a professor of the healing craft. When we were shown in, Mrs. Westerino met us. She was alarmed, but not nearly so much as I expected to find her. Nature, in one of her beneficial moods, has ordained that even death has some antidote to its own terrors. Here, in a case where any shock may prove fatal, matters are so ordered that, for some cause or other, the things not personal, even the terrible change in her daughter to whom she is so attached, do not seem to reach her. It is something like the way tame nature gathers round a foreign body to envelop of some insensitive tissue which can protect from evil that which it would otherwise harm by contact. If this be an ordered selfishness, then we should pause before we condemn anyone for the vice of egoism, for there may be deeper roots for its cause than we have knowledge of. I used my knowledge of this plane of spiritual pathology, and laid down a rule that she should not be present with Lucy or think of her illness more than was absolutely required. She assented readily, so readily that I saw again the hand of nature fighting for life. Van Helsing and I were shown up to Lucy's room. If I was shocked when I saw her yesterday, I was horrified when I saw her today. She was ghastly, chalkily pale. The red seemed to have gone even from her lips and gums, and the bones of her face stood out prominently. Her breathing was painful to see or hear. Van Helsing's face grew set as marble, and his eyebrows converged till they almost touched over his nose. Lucy lay motionless, and did not seem to have strength to speak, so for a while we were all silent. Then Van Helsing beckoned to me, and we went gently out of the room. The instant we had closed the door, he stepped quickly along a passage to the next door, which was open. Then he pulled me quickly in with him and closed the door. "My God," he said, "this is dreadful. There is no time to be lost. She will die for sheer want of blood to keep her heart's action as it should be. There must be transfusion of blood at once. Is it you or me? I'm younger and stronger, Professor. It must be me. Then we get ready at once. I will bring up my bag. I am prepared. I went downstairs with him, and as we were going there was a knock at the hall door. When we reached the hall, the maid had just opened the door, and Arthur was stepping quickly in. He rushed up to me, saying in an eager whisper, Jack, I was so anxious. I read between the lines of your letter, and have been in an agony. The dad was better, so I ran down here to see for myself. Is this not the gentleman, Dr. Van Helsing? I am so thankful you, sir, for coming. When first the professor's eye had lit upon him, he had been angry at any interruption at such time. But now, as he took in his stalwart proportions and recognized the strong young manhood which seemed to emanate from him, his eyes gleamed. Without a pause, he said to him gravely as he held out his hand, Sir, you have come just in time. You are the lover of our dear miss. She is bad, very, very bad. Nay, my child, do not go like that, for he suddenly grew pale and sat down in a chair, almost fainting. You are here to help her. You can do more than any that live, and your courage is your best help. What can I do? Said Arthur hoarsely. Tell me, and I shall do it. My life is hers, and I would give the last drop of my blood in the body for her. The professor was strongly humorous side, and I could, from an old knowledge, detect a trace of its origin in his answer. Guilty. My young sir, I do not ask so much as that. Not the last. What shall I do? There was a fire in his eyes, and his nostrils quivered with intent. Van Helsing slapped him on the shoulder. Come, he said. You are a man, and it is a man we want. You are better than me, better than my friend John. Arthur looked bewildered, and the professor went on by explaining in a kindly way, Young miss is a bad, very bad. She wants blood, and blood she must have or die. My friend John and I have consulted, and we are about to perform what we call a transfusion of blood. To transfer from full veins of one to empty veins which pine for him. John was to give his blood, as he is more young and strong than me. Here Arthur took my hand and wrung it in hard silence. But now you are here, you are more good than us, old or young, who toil much in the world of thought. Our nerve is not so calm, or our blood is not as bright as yours. Arthur turned to him and said, If you only knew how gladly I would die for her, you would understand. He stopped, with a sort of choke in his voice. You're welcome. Good boy, said Van Helsing. And they're not so far off. You will be happy that you have done all for her you love. Come now, and be silent. You shall kiss her once before it is done, and then you must go, and you must leave at my sign. Say no word to Madame. You know how it is with her. There must be no shock. Any knowledge of this would be one. Come. We all went up to Lucy's room. Arthur, by direction, remained outside. Lucy turned her head and looked at us, but said nothing. She was not asleep, but she was simply too weak to make the effort. Her eyes spoke to us, that was all. Van Helsing took some things from his bag and laid them on a little table out of sight. Then he mixed a narcotic, and coming over to the bed, said cheerfully, Now, little miss, here is your medicine. Drink it off like a good child. See, I lift you so that you can swallow it easy. Yes. He had made the effort, with success. It astonished me how long the drug took to act. This, in fact, marked the extent of her weakness. This time seemed endless until sleep began to flicker in her eyelids. At last, however, the narcotic began to manifest its potency, and she fell into a deep sleep. When the professor was satisfied, he called Arthur into the room and bade him strip off his coat. Then he added, You may take that one little kiss whilst I bring over the table. Friend John, help me. So neither of us looked while he bent over her. Van Helsing turned to me and said, He is so young and strong, and of blood so pure that we need not defibrate it. Then, with swiftness and with absolute method, Van Helsing performed the operation. As the transfusion went on, something like life seemed to grow back in poor Lucy's cheeks, and through Arthur's growing power, the joy of his face seemed absolute to shine. After a bit, I began to grow anxious, for the loss of blood was telling on Arthur, strong man as he was. It gave me an idea of what a terrible strain Lucy's system must have undergone, that what weakened Arthur only partially restored her. But the professor's face was set, and he stood watch in hand, and with his eyes fixed now on the patient, and now on Arthur. I could hear my own heart beat. Presently he said in a soft voice, Do not stir for an instant. It is enough. You attend him, I will look to her. When all was over, I could see how much Arthur was weakened. I dressed the wound and took his arm to bring him away. When Van Helsing spoke without turning around, the man seemed to have eyes in the back of his head. The brave lover, I think, deserve another kiss, which he shall have presently. And as he now finished his operation, he adjusted the pillow to the patient's head. As he did so, the narrow black velvet band which she seemed to wear around her throat, buckled with an old diamond buckle which her lover had given her, was dragged up a little, and showed a red mark on her throat. Arthur did not notice it, but I could hear the deep hiss and withdrawn breath, which is one of Van Helsing's ways of betraying emotion. He said nothing at the moment, but turned to me, saying, Now take down our brave young lover. Give him to the port wine, and let him lie down a while. He must then go home and rest, sleep much, and eat much, that he may be recruited of what he has so given of his love. He must not stay here. Hold a moment. I may take, sir, that you are anxious of the result. Then bring it with you in all ways. The operation was successful. You have saved her life this time, and you can go home and rest easy in mind that all that can be is. I shall tell her all when she is well. She shall love you none the less for what you have done. Goodbye. When Arthur had gone, I went back to the room. Lucy was sleeping gently, but her breathing was stronger. I could see the counterpane move when her breast heaved. By the bedside sat Van Helsing, looking at her intently. The velvet band again covered the red mark. I asked the professor in a whisper, What do you make of that mark on her throat? What do you make of it? I have not seen it yet, I answered, and there proceeded to loose the band. Just over the external jugular vein there were two punctures, not large, but not wholesome looking. There was no sign of disease, but the edges were white and worn looking, as if by some trituration. It at once occurred to me that this wound, or whatever it was, might be the means of the manifest loss of blood. But I abandoned the idea as soon as it formed, for such a thing could not be. The whole bed would have been drenched in scarlet with the blood which the girl must have lost to leave such a pallor as she had before the transfusion. Well, said Van Helsing, Well, said I can make nothing of it. The professor stood up. I must go back to Amsterdam tonight, he said. There are books and things there which I want. You must remain here all night, and you must not let your sight pass from her. Shall I have a nurse? I asked. We are the best nurses, you and I. You keep watch all night. See that she's well fed and that nothing disturbs her. You must not sleep at all tonight. Later we can go sleep, you and I. I shall be back as soon as possible, and then we may begin. May begin, I said. What on earth do you mean? We shall see, he answered as he hurried out. He came back a moment later and put his head inside the door and said, with a warning finger held up, Remember, she is your charge. If you leave her and harm befall, you shall not sleep easy hereafter. Dr. Seward's diary continued. 8th of September. I sat up all night with Lucy. The opiate worked itself off towards dusk, and she waked naturally. She looked a different being from what she had been before the operation. Her spirits were even good, and she was full of a happy vivacity, but I could see evidences of absolute prostration which she had undergone. When I told Mrs. Westerina that Dr. Van Helsing had directed that I should sit up with her, she almost pooh-poohed the idea, pointing out her daughter's renewed strength and excellent spirits. I was firm, however, and had made preparations for my long vigil. When her maid had prepared her for the night, I came in, having in the meantime had supper, and took a seat by the bedside. She did not in any way make objection, but looked at me gratefully whenever I caught her eye. After a long spell, she seemed sinking off to sleep, but with an effort seemed to pull herself together and shake it off. This was repeated several times, with greater effort and shorter pauses as the time moved on. It was apparent that she did not want to sleep, so I tackled the subject at once. You do not want to go to sleep? No, I'm afraid. Afraid to go to sleep? Why so? It is the boon we all crave for. Ah, not if you were like me. If sleep was to you a passage of horror. Passage of horror? What on earth do you mean? I don't know. Oh, I don't know. And that is what is so terrible. All the sweetness comes to me in sleep, till I dread the very thought. But my dear girl, you may sleep tonight. I am here watching you, and I can promise that nothing will happen. I can trust you. I seized the opportunity, and I said, I promise you that if I see any evidence of bad dreams, I will wake you at once. You will? Oh, will you really? How good you are to me. Then I will sleep. And almost at the word she gave a deep sigh of relief and sank back, asleep. All night long I watched her. She never stirred, but slept on in a deep, tranquil, life-giving, health-giving sleep. Her lips were parted slightly, and her breast rose and fell with the regularity of a pendulum. There was a smile on her face, and it was evident that no bad dreams had come to disturb her peace of mind. In early morning her maid came, and I left her to her care, and took myself back home, for I was anxious about many things. I sent a short wire to Van Helsing and to Arthur, telling them of the excellent result of the operation. My own work, with its manifold arrears, took me all day to clear off. It was dark when I was able to inquire about my Zophagus patient. The report was good. He had been quite quiet the past day and night. A telegram from Van Helsing at Amsterdam whilst I was at dinner suggested that I should be at the Hillingham tonight, as it might as well be at hand, and stating that he was leaving by the night mail and would join me early in the morning. 9th September. I was pretty tired and worn out when I got to Hillingham. For 2 nights I had hardly had a wink of sleep, and my brain was beginning to feel the numbness which marks cerebral exhaustion. Lucy was up and in cheerful spirits. When she shook hands with me, she looked sharply in my face and said, "No sitting up tonight for you. You are worn out. I'm quite well again. Indeed, I am. And if there is to be any sitting up, it is I who will sit up with you." I would not argue the point, but went and had my supper. Lucy came with me, and enlivened by her charming presence, I made an excellent meal, and had a couple of glasses or more of an excellent port. Then Lucy took me upstairs, and showed me a room next to her own, where a cozy fire was burning. "Now," she said, "you must stay here. I shall leave this door open and my door too. You can lie on the sofa, for I know that nothing would induce any of you doctors to go to bed whilst there's a patient above the horizon. If I want anything, I shall call out, and you can come to me at once." I could not but acquiescence, for I was dog-tired, and could not have sat up had I tried. So, on renewing her promise to call me if she should want anything, I lay on the sofa and forgot all about everything. Lucy Western's Diary, 9th September. I feel so happy tonight. I have been so miserably weak that to be able to think and move about is like feeling sunshine after a long spell of east wind out of the steel sky. Somehow Arthur feels very, very close to me. I seem to feel his presence warm about me. I suppose it is that sickness and weakness are selfish things, and turn our inner eyes and sympathy on ourselves, whilst health and strength give love rein, and in thought and feeling he can wander where he wills. I know where my thoughts are. If Arthur only knew. My dear, your ears must tingle as you sleep as mine do waking. Oh, the blissful rest of last night! How I slept with that dear, good Dr. Seward watching me. And tonight I shall not fear to sleep, since he is close at hand and within call. Thank everybody for being so good to me. Thank God. Good night, Arthur. Dr. Seward's Diary, 10th September. I was conscious of the professor's hand on my head, and started awake in a second. That is one of the things that we learn in the asylum, at any rate. "How is our patient?" "Well, when I left her, or rather, when she left me," I answered. "Come, let us see," he said, and together we went into the room. The blind was down, and I went over to raise it gently, whilst Van Helsing stepped with his soft, cat-like tread over to the bed. As I raised the blind, the morning sunlight flooded the room. I heard the professor's low hiss of inspiration, and knowing its rarity, and deadly fears shot through my heart. As I passed over, he moved back, and his exclamation of horror, "Gott im Himmel!" needed no enforcement from his agonized face. He raised his hand and pointed at the bed, and his iron face was drawn and ashen white. I fell to my knees and began to tremble. There on the bed, seemingly in a swoon, lay poor Lucy, more horribly white and wan-looking than ever. Even the lips were white, and the gums seemed to have shrunken back from the teeth, as we were sometimes seen in a corpse after a prolonged illness. Van Helsing raised his foot to stamp in anger, but the instinct of his life and all the long years of habit stood to him, and he put it down softly again. "Quick," he said, "bring the brandy." I flew to the dining room and returned with a decanter. He wetted the poor white lips with it, and together we rubbed palm and wrist and heart. He felt her heart, and after a few moments of agonized suspense, said, "It is not too late. It beats, though but feebly. All of our work is undone. We must begin again. There is no young Arthur here now. I have to call on you yourself this time, friend John." As he spoke, he was dipping into his bag and producing the instruments for transfusion. I had taken off my coat and rolled up my shirt sleeve. There was no possibility of an opiate just at present, and no need of one, and so, without a moment's delay, we began the operation. After a time, it did not seem a short time either, for the draining away of one's blood, no matter how willingly it be given, is a terrible feeling. Van Helsing held up a warning finger. "Do not stir," he said, "but I fear that with growing strength she may wake, and that would make danger. Oh, so much danger. But I shall precaution take. I have a hypodermic injection of morphia." He produced them, swiftly and deftly, to carry out his intent. Then the effect on Lucy was not bad, for the faint seemed to merge subtly with the narcotic sleep. It was with a feeling of personal pride that I could see a faint tinge of color steal back from the pallid cheeks and lips. No man knows, till he experiences it, what it is to feel his own lifeblood drawn away into the veins of a woman he loves. The professor watched me critically. "That will do," he said. "Already?" "Oh, already?" I remonstrated. You took a great deal more from art," to which he smiled a sad sort of smile as he replied, "He is her lover, her fiancé. You have work, much work to do for her and for others, and the present will suffice." When we stopped the operation, he attended to Lucy whilst I applied digital pressure to my own incision. I lay down whilst I waited his leisure to attend to me, for I felt faint and a little sick. By and by he bound up my wound and sent me downstairs to get a glass of wine for myself. As I was leaving the room, he came after me and half whispered, "Mind, nothing must be said of this. If our young lover should turn up unexpected as before, no word to him. It would at once frighten him and jealous him too. There must be done so." When I came back, he looked at me carefully and then said, "You are not much the worse. Go into your room and lie on your sofa and rest a while. Then have much breakfast and come here to me." I followed out his orders, for I knew how right and wise they were. I had done my part. Now my next duty was to keep my own strength. I felt very weak, and in the weakness lost something of the amazement at what had occurred. I fell asleep on the sofa, however, wondering how, over and over again, how Lucy had made such a retrograde movement, and how she could have been drained of so much blood with no sign anywhere to show of it. I think I must have continued to wonder in my dreams, for sleeping and waking my thoughts always came back to the little punctures on her throat and the ragged, exhausted appearance of their edges, though tiny they were. Lucy slept well into the day, and when she woke she was fairly well and strong, though not nearly so much as the day before. When Van Helsing had seen her, he went out for a walk, leaving me in charge, with strict injunctions that I was not to leave her for a moment. I could hear his voice in the hall, asking the way to the nearest telegraph office. Lucy chatted with me freely, and seemed quite unconscious that anything had happened. I tried to keep her amused and interested. When her mother came in to see her, she did not seem to notice my change whatsoever, but said to me gratefully, "We owe so much to you, Dr. Stewart, for all you have done, for you really must now take care not to overwork yourself. You are looking pale yourself. You want a wife to nurse and look after you a bit. That you do." As she spoke, Lucy turned crimson, though it was only momentary, for Her poor wasted veins could not stand for long of an unwanted drain to the head. The reaction came in expressive pallor as she turned imploringly to me. I nodded and smiled and laid my finger on my lips with a sigh and sank back amid her pillows. Van Helsing returned in a couple of hours and presently said to me, "Now you go home and eat much and drink enough. Make yourself strong. I stay here tonight, and I shall sit up with the little miss myself. You and I must watch this case, and we must have none other to know. I have grave reasons. No, do not ask them. Think what you will. Do not fear to think even the most probable. Good night." In the hall, two of the maids came to me and asked if either of them might sit up with Miss Lucy. They implored me to let them, and when I said it was Dr. Van Helsing's wish that either he or I should sit up, they asked me quite piteously to intercede with the foreign gentleman. I was touched by their kindness. Perhaps it was because I am weak at present, or perhaps it was Lucy's account that their devotion was manifested, for over and over again have I seen similar instances of women's kindness. I got back here in time for late dinner, went my rounds, all well, and set this down whilst waiting for sleep. It is coming. 11 September. This afternoon I went over to Hillingham. Found Van Helsing in excellent spirits and Lucy much better. Shortly after I had arrived, a big parcel from abroad came for the professor. He opened it with much empressement, assumed, of course, and showed a great bundle of white flowers. "These are for you, Miss Lucy," he said. "For me? Oh, Dr. Van Helsing." "Yes, my dear, but not for you to play with. These are medicines." Here Lucy made a wry face. "Nay, but they are not to take in deduction or nauseous form, so you need not snub that so charming nose, or I shall point out to my friend Arthur what woes he may have to endure in seeing such beauty that he loves and such different comforts. Aha, my pretty miss, the bring of such a nice nose is straight again. This is medicinal, but you do not know how. I put them in your windows, and make a pretty wreath and hang them around your neck, so that you will sleep well. Oh, yes, they are like the lotus flower, make your trouble forgotten. It smell like the waters of Lethe, and of that fountain of youth that the conquistadors fought for in Florida, and find them all too late." Interesting. Whilst he was speaking, Lucy had been examining the flowers and smelling them. Now she threw them down, saying in half laughter and half disgust, "Oh, Professor, I believe that you're only putting a joke on me. Why, these flowers are only common garlic." To my surprise, Van Helsing rose up and said with all sternness, his iron jaws set and his bushy eyebrows meeting, "No trifling with me. I never jest. There is a grim purpose in all I do, and I warn you that you do not thwart me. Take care, for the sake of others, if not for your own." Then, seeing poor Lucy scared, as she might well be, he went on more gently. "Oh, little miss, my dear, do not fear me. I only do for your good. But there is much virtue to you in those little common flowers. See, I place them myself in your room. I make myself a wreath that you were to wear. But hush! No telling to others that make so inquisitive questions. We must obey, and silence is part of the obedience, and obedience is to bring you strong and well into loving arms that wait for you. Now sit a while. Come with me, friend John, and you shall help me deck the room with my garlic, which is all the way from Haarlem, where my friend Vanderpool raises herbs in his glasshouses all year. I had to telegraph today, or they would not have been here. We went into the room, taking the flowers with us. The professor's actions were certainly odd, and not to be found in any pharmacopoeia that I had heard of. He had fastened up the window and latched them securely. Next, taking a handful of the flowers, he rubbed them all over the sashes, as though to ensure that every whiff of air that might get in would be laden with the garlic smell. Then, with a wisp, he rubbed all over the door jamb, above, below, and each side, and all around the fireplace in the same way. It all seemed grotesque to me. And presently, I said, "Well, Professor, I know you always have a reason for what you do, but this certainly puzzles me. It is well to have no septic here, but would say that you are working some spell to keep out an evil spirit." "Perhaps I am," he answered quietly as he began to make a wreath which Lucy was to wear around her neck. We then waited whilst Lucy made her toilet for the night, and when she was in bed he came and fixed the wreath of garlic around her neck. The last words he said to her were, "Take care you do not disturb it, and even if the room feel close, do not open window or the door." "I promise," said Lucy, "and thank you both 1,000 times for all your kindness to me. Oh, what have I done to be blessed with such friends?" As we left the house in my fly, which was waiting, Van Helsing said, "Tonight I can sleep in peace, and sleep I want. 2 nights of travel, much reading in the day between, and much anxiety on the day to follow, and a night to sit up without a wink. Tomorrow in the morning early you shall call me, and we come together to see your pretty miss, and so much more strong for my spell which I have worked. Ho ho!" He seemed so confident that I, remembering my own confidence 2 nights before, and with the baneful result, felt awe and vague terror. It must have been my weakness that made me hesitate to tell it to my friend, and I felt it all the more like unshed tears. Chapter 11. Lucy Westerna's Diary. 12th September. How good they all are to me. I quite love that dear Dr. Van Helsing. I wonder why he was so anxious about these flowers. He positively frightened me, he was so fierce. And yet he must have been right, for I feel comfort from them already. Somehow I do not dread being alone tonight, and I can go to sleep without fear. I shall not mind any flapping outside my window. Oh, the terrible struggle that I have had against sleep so often of late. The pain of the sleeplessness, or the pain of the fear of sleep, with such unknown horrors as it has for me. How blessed are some people whose lives have no fears, no dreads, to whom sleep is a blessing that comes nightly and brings nothing but sweet dreams. Well, here I am tonight, hoping for sleep, and lying like Ophelia in the play, with virgin krantz and maiden strewmeats. I never liked garlic before, but tonight it was delightful. There's a peace in its smell. I feel sleep coming already. Good night, everybody. Hi, Nessie. Dr. Seward's Diary, 13th September. Called, called at the Berkeley, and found Van Helsing as usual up to time. The carriage offered from the hotel was waiting. The professor took his bag, which he always brings with him now. Let us be put down exactly. Van Helsing and I arrived at the Hillingham at 8 o'clock. It was a lovely morning, and the bright sunshine and all the fresh feeling of early autumn seemed like a completion of nature's annual work. The leaves were turning to all kinds of beautiful colors, but had not yet begun to drop from the trees. When we met Mrs. Westrana coming out of the morning room. She is always an early riser. She greeted us warmly and said, "You will be glad to know that Lucy is better. The dear child is still asleep. I looked into her room and saw her, but did not go in, lest I disturb her." The professor smiled and looked quite jubilant. He rubbed his hands together and said, "Aha! I thought I had diagnosed the case. My treatment is working." To which she answered, "You must not take all the credit to yourself, Doctor. Lucy's state in the morning is in part due to me." "What do you mean, madam?" asked the professor. "Well, I was anxious about my dear child last night and went into her room. She was sleeping soundly, so soundly that even my coming did not wake her. But the room was awfully stuffy. There were a lot of those horrible, strong-smelling flowers about everywhere, and she had actually a bunch of them around her neck. I feared that the heavy odor would be too much for her in her dear weak state, so I took them all away and opened the window a bit to let in some fresh air. You will be pleased with her, I am sure." She moved off to her boudoir, where she usually breakfasted early. As she had spoken, I watched the professor's face, and saw it turn ashen gray. He had been able to retain himself from self-command whilst the poor lady was present, for he knew her state and how mischievous a shock would be to her. He actually smiled on her as he held the door open for her to pass into her room. But the instant she disappeared, he pulled me suddenly and forcibly into the dining room and closed the door. Then, for the first time in my life, I saw Van Helsing break down. He raised his hands over his head in a sort of mute despair, and then he beat his palms together in a helpless way. Finally, he sat down in a chair. "Now, sir, you can go on and ask me what you want. You'll excuse me for refusing to talk my professional subjects before meals. I gives the wolves and the jackals and the hyenas all their section of tea before I begin to ask them questions." "How do you mean, ask them questions?" I queried, wishing to get him into a talkative humor. "Hit them over the head with a pole's a way of scratching their ears is another. When chances flush wants a bit of show off to cows, I don't so much mind the first, but sitting them over the pole with chucks them the dinner. But I waits till they're sharing coffee, so to speak, before I tries to on with an ear scratching, mind you," he added philosophically. "There's a deal of the same nature in us as there in the animals. Here's you a coming and asking me questions about my business and that grumpy like and all the bloomin' your arf squid. I'd have seen you blowed first, before I'd answer. Not even when you asked me a sarcastic like as if you list or asked the superintendent if you might ask me questions without offence, did I tell you to go and tell him." "You did?" "And when you said you'd report me for using obscene language that was hitting me over the head, and the off squid made me all right, and you was going to fight. So I waited for the food, and I did my hour as the wolves and lions and tigers does. Before you left, but you love the art. Now you an old human that's stuck a chunk of tea cake in me, and rinsed me out with a bloomin' old teapot. And I've lit up, and you may scratch my ears for all you're worth, and won't even get a growl out of me. Drive me along your questions. I know what you're coming to, and that old scared wolf." That is actually how it is written in this book. Oh. Exactly. I want to want you to give me your full view of it. Just tell me how it happened. I want to know the facts. I'll get you to say what you consider was the cause of it, and how you think the whole affair will end. "All right, Governor. This is about the old story. That werewolf that we called Berserker was one of them 3 greys that come from the Norwegian Jarmarks, which we bought off of him 4 years ago. He was a nice, well-behaved wolf that never gave no trouble to talk of. I'm more surprised at him waiting to get out another animal in this place. But there, you can't trust wolves no more than women. Don't mind me. Don't mind him, sir, broke in Mrs. Tom with a cheery laugh. He's not minding animals so long as a blessed child and old wolf himself. But there ain't no harm in it. Oh, sir, it was about 2 hours of feeding yesterday when I first... Did I miss like an entire page here or what? Oh, shit, I did. Okay, sorry. Okay. That was a different section called The Escaped Wolf. Okay. After putting his hands before his face, began to sob. With loud, dry sobs that seemed to come from the very racking of his heart. And then he raised his arms again, though appealing for the whole universe. God, 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 he said. What have we done? What has this poor thing done? If we are so beset. It's our fate amongst us still, sent down from the pagan of the old world, that such things be, and in such way. This poor mother, all unknowing, and all for the best as she thinks, does she thing as lose her daughter body and soul. And we must not tell her. We must not even warn her, or she die, and then both die. Oh, how we beset? How are the powers of the devils against us? Suddenly he jumped to his feet. Come, he said. Come, we must see an act. Devils or no devils, or all devils at once, it matters not. We fight him all the same. He went to the door-hole for his bag, and together we went up to Lucy's room. Once again I drew up the blind, whilst Van Helsing went towards the bed. This time he did not start as he looked to the poor face, and saw the same awful waxen power as before. He wore stern sadness and infinite pity. As I expected, he murmured, with that hissing inspiration of his which meant so much. Without a word he went and locked the door, and then began to set at a little table with the instruments of yet another operation of transfusion of blood. I had long ago recognized the necessity and began to take off my coat, but he stopped me with a warning hand. No, he said. Today you must operate. I shall provide. You are weakened already. As he spoke, he took off his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeve. Again the operation, again the narcotic, again some return of color to the ashen cheeks, and the regular breathing of a healthy sleep. This time I watched whilst Van Helsing recruited himself and rested. Presently he took an opportunity to tell Miss Westerina that she must not remove anything from Lucy's room without consulting him, that the flowers were of medicinal value, and that the breathing of their odor was part of the system of care. Then he took over the care of the case himself, saying that he would watch this night, and next he would send me word when to come. After another hour, Lucy waked from her sleep, fresh and bright, and seemingly not so much worse for the terrible ordeal. What does it all mean? I'm beginning to wonder if my long habit of life amongst the insane is beginning to tell upon me on my own brain. Lucy Westerina's diary, September 17th. 4 nights and days of peace. I'm getting so strong again that I hardly know myself. It is as if I had passed through some long nightmare and had just awakened to see a beautiful sunshine and feel the fresh air of the morning around me. I have a dim half-remembrance of long, anxious times of waiting and fearing, darkness in which there is not even a pain of hope to make present distress more poignant, and then long spells of oblivion, and the rising back to the river of life as the diver comes through the great peril of water. Since, however, Dr. Van Helsing has been with me, all this bad dreaming seems to have passed away. The noises that used to frighten me out of my wits, the flapping against the windows, distant voices which seemed to close to me, the harsh sounds that came from I know not where, and commanded me to do I know not what, all have ceased. I go to bed now without fearing any sleep. I do not even try to keep awake. I've grown quite fond of the garlic, and the boxful arrives for me every day from Eileen. Tonight, Dr. Van Helsing is going away, and he be has to be for a day in Amsterdam. But I need not be watched, for I am well enough to be left alone. For God's sake, my mother's sake, and dear Arthur's, and for all of our friends who have been so kind, I shall not even feel the change, for last night Dr. Van Helsing asleep in the chair a lot of the time. I found him asleep twice when I awoke, but I did not fear to go to sleep again, although the boughs and bats or something flapped angrily against the window panes. Okay, now I can read the one about the wolf. Pall Mall Gazette, 18th September. The Escaped Wolf. Perilous adventure of our interviewer. Interview with the keeper of the zoological gardens. I have to go through all this again, so I don't have to do a voice. After many inquiries and almost as many refusals, and perpetually using the words Pall Mall Gazette as a sort of talisman, I managed to find the keeper of the sections of the zoological gardens in which the wolf department is located. Thomas Builder lives in one of the cottages in the enclosure behind the elephant house, and he was sitting down to his tea when I found him. Thomas and his wife are hospitable folk, elderly, and without children, and if the specimen I enjoyed of their hospitality be of the average kind, their lives must be pretty comfortable. The keeper would not enter on what he called business until supper was over, and we were all satisfied. Then, when the table was cleared, and he had lit his pipe, he said, "Now, sir, you can go on and ask me about what you want. You'll excuse me for refusing to talk of professional subjects up before meals. I gives the wolves and the jackals and the hyenas all their section before the tea before I begin to ask them questions." "How do you mean ask them questions?" I queried, wishing to get some in the talkative humor. "Hitting them over the head with the pole is one way, scritching of their ears is another. When gents is flush wants to show off a bit to gals. I don't so much mind at first the hitting with the pole before I chucks them the dinner, but I waits till they've had their share in coffee, so to speak, before I tries them with the ear scritching," he added philosophically. "It's a deal of the same nature in us as them there animals. Here's you a coming and asking me questions about my business, and I, that grumpy like, only for your bloomin' offering quid. I'd have seen you blowed fist before I'd answer. Not even when you asked me a sarcastic like, if you'd like to ask the superintendent if I might ask questions. Without offense, did I tell you to go to hell?" "You did." "And when you said you'd report me for using obscene language and hitting me over the head, but the off squid made out all right. I weren't going to fight, so I waited for food, and did as my owl and the wolves and lions and tigers does. But you'll love your art, now that the old human has struck trunk of tea cake in me, and rinsing me out with a bloomin' old teapot, and I've lit up. You may scratch my ears for all you're worth. You won't even get a growl out of me. Drive along with your questions. I know what's a-comin', and that 'ere escaped wolf." Hi, Sammy. Exactly. What I want to give you is your view of it. Just tell me how it happened. When I know the facts, I'll get you to say what you consider to be the cause of it and how you think the whole affair will end. "All right, Governor. This is about the whole story. That 'ere wolf, what we called Brasica, was one of 3 grey ones that came out of Norway to Jarmuch, which we brought off 'em 4 years ago. He was a nice, well-behaved wolf that never gave no trouble to walk of. I'm more surprised at him waiting to get out than any more animal in this place. But there, you can't trust wolves no more than well women. Don't you mind him, sir? Broke in Mrs. Tom with a cheery laugh. He's got minding the animals so long that bless him, he ain't an old wolf himself. But there ain't no harm in him. Well, sir, it was about 2 hours after feeding yesterday when I first heard any disturbance. I was making up a litter for the monkey house for a young puma which is ill. But when I heard the yelping and howling, I came straight away. There was old Berserker tearing like a mad thing at the bars as if he wanted to get out. There wasn't much people about that day, and close at hand was only one man, a tall, thin chap with a hooked nose and a pointed beard, with a few white hairs running through. He had odd, cold-looking red eyes. I took him some misliking, for it seemed as if he was him that was irritated at. He had white kid gloves on his hands and pointed out like the animal was to be. And he says, Keeper, these wolves seem upset about something. Well, maybe it's you, says I, for I did not like the airs he gave himself. He didn't get angry, but I hoped he would, and kind of smiled an insolent smile, with a mouth full of white teeth. Oh, no, they wouldn't like me, he says. Oh, yes, they would, I says, imitating him. They always lacks a bone or two to clean their teeth out after tea time, which you has a bag full. Well, it is an odd thing, but when the animals see us talking, they lay down, and I went over to Berserker, and he let me stroke his ears, same as ever. That there man care nowhere, and bless, but if he didn't put his hand and stroke the old wolf's ears too. Take care, says I. Berserker is quick. Never mind, he says. I'm used to them. Are you in the business yourself? I says, taking off my hat for a man who trades wolves and as assessor is a good friend to keepers. No, he says. Not exactly in the business, but I have made a few pets of several. And with that he lifts his parallel to the Lord and walks away. Oh, Berserker keep looking at him till he was out of sight, and then went and lay down in the corner and wouldn't come out till old evening. Well, last night, as soon as the moon was up, the wolves were all howling, and there weren't nothing for them to howl at. There weren't no one near, not except someone that was eventually a-calling the dog somewheres back in the gardens in the park road. God, this is hard to read. Once or twice I went out to see it was all right, and it was, and then the howling stopped just before 12 o'clock, and I took a look around before turning in and bust me. But when I went to opposite old Berserker's cage, I seen the rails broken and twisted about, and the cage empty. That's all I know for certain. Did anyone else see anything? One of our gardeners was a-coming around about that time and saw Army. He sees a big old gray dog running and coming through the garden edges. At least so he says. But I don't give much for it myself, for he never did say a word about anything to Mrs. and me when he got home. And it was only after the escape of the wolf it was made known. We've been up all night hunting the park with Berserker, but he was remembered seeing anything. My old belief is that Harmony had got it in his head. Now, Mr. Boulder, can you account for any way the escape of the wolf? Well, sir, he said, in a suspicious sort of modesty, I think I can, but I don't know as how you'd be satisfied with the theory. Certainly I shall. If a man like you, who knows the animals from experience, can't hazard a good guess at any rates, who's to even try? Well then, sir, I accounts for it this way. It seems to me that this here wolf escaped simply because he wanted to get out. Yeah. From the hearty way that both Thomas and his wife laughed at the joke, I could see that it was done service before, and that a whole explanation was simply an elaborate sell. I couldn't cope with bandages with the worthy Thomas, but I thought I would stir away to find his heart to say so. Now, Mr. Builder, we'll consider that first half-sovereigner worked off, and his brother this is waiting to be claimed when you've told me what you think will happen. Right, yeah, sir, he said briskly. You'll excuse me, I know, for chaffing of ye, but the old woman here winked at me, which was as much as telling me to go on. Well, I never, said the old lady. My opinion is this. There wolf is hiding off somewheres. The gardener what didn't remember he was said galloping forward faster than a horse could go. And I don't believe him, for you see, sir, wolves don't gallop no more than dog does. They're not being built that way. Wolves is a fine thing in a storybook. And I just say that when they gets in the packs and does some chivin', something that's more feared than they is, and they make the devil of a noise and chop it up, whatever it is. But Lord bless you, in real life a wolf is only a low creature, not half so clever or bold as a good dog. And not a quarter as much fight in it. This one ain't been used to fighting or even prowling for himself, and more like he's found someone around the park hiding and shivering of. And if he thinks at all, wondering where he is going to get his breakfast from, or maybe he's got down some area where he's got the coal cellar, my, won't some cook get a rum start when he sees his green eyes a shining at her out of the dark. If he can't get a food, he's bound to look for it, and mayhaps he might chance on the lie to the butcher's shop sometime. If he doesn't, some nursemaid goes a walking off with the soldier and leaving off the infant with the permulator, well, then I shouldn't be surprised if the census is one baby the less. Wow. I was handing him the half-sovereign when something came bobbing up against the window, and Mr. Builder's face doubled its natural length in surprise. God bless me, he said, if it ain't old Berserker come back to himself. He went to the door and opened it. A most unnecessary proceeding seemed to me. I've always thought a wild animal never looks so well as when some obstacle as pronounced durability is between us. My personal experience has intensified rather than diminished that idea. After all, however, there is nothing like custom, for neither Builder nor his wife thought any more than a wolf than I should a dog. The animal itself was peaceful and well behaved as the father of all picture wolves. Red Riding Hood's quondam friend, while seeking her confidence in masquerade. The whole scene was an unutterable mixture of comedy and pathos. The wicked wolf that for half a day had paralyzed London and set all children in town shivering in their shoes was there in a sort of penitent mood, and was received and petted like all sort of Vulpine prodigal son. Old Builder examined him all over and with most tender solicitude, and when he finished with his penance said, There, I knew the poor old chap would get into some kind of trouble. Didn't I say all along? Here's a head all cut and full of broken glass. He's been a-getting over some bloomin' wall or something or other. It's a shame that people are allowed to top their walls with broken bottles. And here's what comes of it. Come along, Berserker. He took the wolf and locked him in a cage, with a piece of meat that satisfied, in quantity at any rate, the elementary conditions of a fatted calf, and went on to report. I came off too to report only the exclusive information that was given today regarding the strange escapade at the zoo. Wolf came home. Dr. Seward's Diary, 17th September. I was engaged after dinner in my study posting up books which, through press of other works and many visits of Lucy, had fallen sadly into her air. Suddenly the door was burst open, and in rushed my patient, with his face distorted with passion. I was thunderstruck for such a thing as a patient getting of my own accord into the superintendent's study and almost unknown. Without an instant's pause, he made straight at me. He had a dinner knife in his hand, and as I saw he was dangerous, I tried to keep the table between us. He was too quick and too strong for me. However, for before I could get my balance, he had struck me and cut my left wrist rather severely. Before he could strike again, however, I got in my right, and he was sprawling on the back on the floor. My wrist bled freely, and quite a little pool trickled onto the carpet. I saw that my friend was not intent on further effort, and occupied himself binding at my wrist, keeping a wary eye on the prostrate figure all the time. When the attendants rushed in and we turned our attention to him, his employment positively sickened me. He was lying on his belly on the floor, licking up like a dog the blood which had fallen from my wounded wrist. He was easily secured, and, to my surprise, went with the attendants quite placidly, simply repeating over and over again, "The blood is alive! The blood is alive!" I cannot afford to lose blood just at present. I have lost too much of my own as late for my physical good, and then the prolonged strain of Lucy's illness and the horrible phases is telling on me. I am overexcited and weary, and I need to rest. Happily, Van Helsing has not summoned me, so I need not forego my sleep. Tonight, I could not well do without it. Telegram, Van Helsing, Antwerp, to Seward, Colfax. Sent Colfax, Sussex, as no county given. Delivered late by 22 hours. 17th September. Do not fail to be at Hillingham tonight. If not watching all the time, frequent visit, and see that the flowers are all placed. Very important, do not fail. Shall be with you as soon as possible afterward. Dr. Seward's Diary, 18th September. Just off for train to London, the arrival of Van Helsing's telegram filled me with dismay. A whole night lost, and I know by bitter experience what may happen in the night. Of course, it is possible that all may be well, but what may have happened? Surely there is some horrible doom hanging over us that every possible accident thwarts us in all we try to do. I shall take the cylinder with me, and then I can complete my entry on Lucy's phonograph. Memorandum left by Lucy Westerna. 17th September, night. I write this and leave it to be seen, so that no one may by any chance get into any trouble through me. This is an exact record of what took place tonight. I feel I am dying of weakness, and I can barely strength to write, but it must be done if I die in the doing. I went to bed as usual, taking care that the flowers were placed as Dr. Van Helsing had directed, and soon fell asleep. I was awakened by flapping at the window, which had begun after the sleepwalking on the cliff of Whitby, when Mina saved me, and which now I know so well. I was not afraid, but I did wish that Dr. Stewart was in the next room, as Dr. Van Helsing said he would, so that I might have called him. I tried to sleep, but could not. Then there came to me an old fear of sleep, and I determined to stay awake. Perversely, sleep would try to come when I did not want it, as I feared to be alone. I opened my door and called out, "Is anybody there?" But there was no answer. I was afraid to wake Mother, so I closed the door again. Then outside in the shrubbery I heard a sort of howl like a dog's, but more forceful and deeper. I went to the window and looked out, but could see nothing except a big bat, which had evidently been buffeting its wings against my window. So I went back to bed, but determined not to go to sleep. Presently the door opened, and my mother looked in. Seeing by my moving that I was not asleep, came in, and sat by me. She said to me even more sweetly and softly than her wont, "I was uneasy about you, darling, and came in to see that you were all right." I feared she might catch cold sitting here, and I asked her to come in and sleep next to me. So she came into bed and lay down next to me. She did not take off her dressing gown, for she said she would only stay a while and then go back to her own bed. As she lay there in my arms, and I with hers, the flapping and buffeting came to the window again. She was startled and a little frightened, and cried out, "What is that?" I tried to pacify her, and at last succeeded, and she lay quiet, but I could hear her poor dear heart still beating terribly. After a while there was a low howl again in the shrubbery, and shortly after there was a crash at the window, and a lot of broken glass was hurled on the floor. The window blind blew back with the wind as it rushed in. In the aperture of the broken panes there was the head of a great, gaunt, grey wolf. Mother cried out in fright and struggled up in a sitting position, and clutched wildly at anything that would help her. Amongst other things she clutched with a wreath of flowers that Dr. Van Helsing insisted on my wearing around my neck, and tore it away from me. For a second or two she sat up, pointed at the wolf. There was a strange and horrible gurgling at her throat. Then she fell over, as if struck with lightning, and hit her head on my forehead, and made me dizzy for a moment or two. The room and all around seemed to spin. I kept my eyes fixed on the window, but the wolf drew his head back, and a whole myriad of little specks come blowing through the broken window and wheeling and circling around like a pillar of dust that travelers describe when there's a monsoon in the desert. I tried to stir, but there was some spell upon me, and Mother's poor body, she seemed to grow cold already, for her dear heart had ceased to beat, weighed me down, and I remembered no more for a while. Time did not seem long, but very, very awful, till I recovered consciousness again. Somewhere near, a passing bell was tolling. The dogs all around the neighborhood were howling, and in our shrubbery, seemingly just outside, a nightingale was singing. I was dazed and stupid with pain and terror and weakness, but the sound of the nightingale seemed like the voice of my dead mother come back to comfort me. The sound seemed to have awakened the maids too, for I could hear their bare feet pattering outside my door. I called to them, and they came in, and when they saw what happened and what was lay over me in the bed, they screamed out. The wind rushed in through the broken window, and the door slammed. They lifted the body of my poor dead mother and laid her, covered up with a sheet, on the bed after I got up. They were all so frightened and nervous that I directed them to go to the dining room and each have a glass of wine. The door flew open for an instant and closed again. The maid shrieked, and then went in a body to the dining room, and I laid the flowers I had on my dear mother's breast. When they lay there, I remembered what Dr. Van Helsing had told me, but I didn't like to remove them, and besides, I would have had some of the servants to sit up with me now. I was surprised that the maids did not come back. I called to them, but got no answer, so I went to the dining room to look for them. My heart sank when I saw what had happened. They all four lay helpless on the floor, breathing heavily. The decanter of sherry was on the table half full. There was a queer, acrid smell about. I was suspicious, and I examined the decanter. It smelt of laudanum, and looking on the sideboard I found the bottle which Mother's doctor uses for her. Oh, it was empty. What am I to do? What am I to do? I'm back in my room with Mother. I cannot leave her, and am I alone save for the sleeping servants whom someone has drugged? Alone with dead, I dare not go out, for I can hear the low howl of the wolf through the broken window. The air seems full of specks, floating and circling in the draught like the window. The light burns blue and dim. What am I to do? God, shield me from the harm of this night. I shall hide this paper in my breast where they shall find it when they come to lay me out. My dear mother gone. It is time that I go too. Goodbye, dear Arthur. If I should not survive this night, God keep you, dear, and God keep me. Chapter 12. Dr. Seward's Diary. 18th September. I drove at once to Hillingham and arrived early. Keeping my cab at the gates, I went up the avenue alone. I knocked gently and rang as quietly as I could, for I feared to disturb Lucy or her mother, and hoped to bring only a servant to the door. After a while, finding no response, I knocked and rang again. Still no answer. I cursed the laziness of the servants that they should lie abed at such an hour, for it was now 10 o'clock. So I rang and knocked again, but more impatiently, and still without response. Hitherto I blamed only the servants, but now a terrible fear began to assail me. Was this desolation but another link in the chain of doom which seemed drawing tight around us? Was it indeed a house of death to which I had come too late? I knew that minutes, even seconds, of delay might mean hours of danger to Lucy. If she had had again one of those dreadful relapses, and I went around the house to try if I could by any chance find entry elsewhere. I could find no means of ingress. Every window and door was fastened and locked, but I returned half to the porch. As I did so, I heard the rapid pit-pat of swiftly driven horses' feet. They stopped at the gate, and a few seconds later I met Van Helsing running up the avenue. When he saw me, he gasped out, "Then it was you, and just arrived. How is she? Am I too late? Did you not get my telegram?" I answered as quickly and coherently as I could that I had only got his telegram early in the morning, and had lost not a minute in coming here, and that I could not make any one in the house hear me. I paused and raised his hat as he said solemnly, "Then I fear we are too late. God's will be done." With his usual recuperative energy, he went on, "Come, if there's no way to get in, we must make one. Time is all, and all is to us now." We went around to the back of the house, where there was a kitchen window. The professor took a small surgical saw from his case, and handing it to me, pointed the iron bars which guarded the window. I attacked them at once, and had very soon cut through 3 of them. Then, with a long, thin knife, we pushed back the fastening of the sashes, and opened the window. I helped the professor in, and followed him. There was no one in the kitchen, or in the servants' rooms, which were close at hand. We tried all the rooms, and went along. And in the dining room, dimly lit by the rays of the light of the shutters, we found 4 servant women lying on the floor. There was no need to think them dead, for their strenuous breathing and acrid smell of laudanum in the room left no doubt as to their condition. Van Helsing and I looked at each other, and as we moved away, we can attend to them later. Then we ascended to Lucy's room. For an instant or two we were paused at the door to listen, but there was no sound that we could hear. With white faces and trembling hands, we opened the door gently and entered the room. How shall we describe what we saw? On the bed lay 2 women, Lucy and her mother. The latter lay farthest in, and she is covered with a white sheet, the edge of which had been blown back by the draught through the window, showing the drawn white face, with a look of terror fixed upon it. By her side lay Lucy, with white face and still more drawn. The flowers which had been around her neck were found upon her mother's bosom, and her throat was bare, showing the 2 little wounds which we had noticed before, but looking horribly white and mangled. Without a word, the professor bent over the bed. His head almost touched poor Lucy's breast. Then he gave a quick turn of his head, as of one who listens, and leaping to his feet, he cried out, "It is not too late yet. Quick, quick, bring the brandy." I flew downstairs and returned with it, taking care to smell and taste it, lest it too were drugged like the decanter of sherry which was found on the table. The maids were still breathing, but more restlessly, and I fancied that the narcotic was wearing off. I did not stay to make sure, but returned to Van Helsing. He rubbed the brandy, as on another occasion, on her lips and gums, and on her wrists and palms of her hands, and said to me, "I can do this, all that can be at present. You go and wake the maids, flick them each in the face with a wet towel, and flick them hard. Make them get heat and fire and warmth and a warm bath. This poor soul is nearly as cold as that beside her. She will need to be heated before we can do anything more." I went at once and found little difficulty in waking 3 of the women. The 4th was only a young girl, and the drug had evidently affected her more strongly. So I lifted her on the sofa and let her sleep. The others were dazed at first, but when the remembrance came back to them, they cried and sobbed in a hysterical manner. I was stern with them, however, and would not let them talk. I told them that one life was bad enough to lose, and if they delayed, they would sacrifice Miss Lucy. So, sobbing and crying, they went about their way, half clad as they were, and prepared fire and water. Fortunately, the kitchen and boiler fires were still alive, so there was no lack of hot water. We got a bath and carried Lucy out as we placed her in it. Whilst we were busy chafing her limbs, there was a knock at the hall door. One of the maids ran off and hurried on and put some clothes on and opened it. When she returned to us, there was a gentleman who had come with a message from Mr. Holmwood. I bade her simply tell him that he must wait, for we could see no one now. She went away with the message, and engrossed with her work, I clean forgot about him. I never saw in all my experience a professor work in such deadly earnest. I knew, as he knew, ouch, that it was a stand-up fight with death, and in a pause told him so. He answered me in a way that I did not understand, but with the sternest look in his face he could wear. "If that were all, I would stop here where we are now, and let her fade away into peace, for I see no light in life over her horizon." He went on with his work, if possible, renewed with frenzied vigor. Presently we both began to be conscious of the heat beginning to have some effect. Lucy's heart beat a trifle more audibly into the stethoscope. Her lungs had a perceptible movement. Van Helsing's face almost beamed as we lifted her from the bath and rolled her in a hot sheet to dry her. And he said to me, "The first gain is ours. Check to the king." We took Lucy into another room, which had been prepared, and laid her in bed and forced a few drops of brandy down her throat. I noticed that Van Helsing tied a soft silk handkerchief around her throat. She was still unconscious, and was quite as bad as, if not worse than, we had ever seen her. Van Helsing called in one of the women and told her to stay and not take her eyes off her until we returned. Then he beckoned me out of the room. "We must consult as to what is to be done," he said as we descended the stairs. In the hall he opened the dining-room door, and we passed in and closed the door carefully behind him. The shutters had been opened, but the blinds were already down, with that obedience to the etiquettes of death which the British women of the lower classes always rigidly observe. The room was, therefore, dimly dark. It was, however, light enough for our purposes. Van Helsing's sternness was somewhat relieved by the look of perplexity. He was evidently torturing his mind about something, so I waited for an instant, and he spoke. "What are we to do now? Where are we to turn for help? We must have another transfusion of blood, and soon, or that poor girl's life won't be worth an hour's purchase. You are exhausted already, and I am exhausted too. I fear to trust those women, even if they would have courage to submit. What are we to do for someone who will open his veins for her?" "What's the matter with me, anyhow?" The voice came from the sofa across the room, and the tones brought relief and joy to my heart, for those were those of Quincy Morris. Van Helsing started angrily at the first sound, but his face softened. A glad look came to his eyes as he cried out, "Quincy Morris!" and he rushed towards him with outstretched hands. "What has brought you here?" I cried as our hands met. I guess the heart is his cause. He handed me a telegram. Have not heard from Seward for 3 days, and am terribly anxious. Cannot leave. Father still in the same condition. Send word to me how Lucy is. Do not delay. Homewood. I think I've I think I've come just in the nick of time. You two have to tell me what to do. Van Helsing strode forward and took his hand, looking straight in the eyes as he said, A brave man's blood is the best thing on earth when a woman is in trouble. You're a man, and no mistake. Well, the devil may work against us for all he's worth, but God sends us men when we want them. Once again, we went through the ghastly operation. I have not the heart to go through the details. Lucy got a terrible shock, and it told her even more than before, though plenty of blood went into her veins, and her body did not respond to the treatment as well as on the other occasions. Her struggle back to life was something frightful to see and hear. However, the action of both hearts and lungs improved, and Van Helsing made a subsequent injection of morphia, as before, with good effect. Her faint became a profound slumber. The professor watched whilst I went downstairs with Quincy and sent some of the maids to pay off one of the cabmen who were waiting. I left Quincy lying down after having a glass of wine and told the cook to get ready with a good breakfast. Then a thought struck me. I went back to the room where Lucy was now. When I came softly in, I found Van Helsing with a sheet or two of notepaper in hand. He had evidently read it and was thinking it over when he sat down his hand with his brow. There was a look of grim satisfaction in his face, as of one who had his doubt solved. He handed me the paper, saying only, It dropped from Lucy's breast when we carried her to the bath. When I read it, I stood looking at the professor, and after a pause, asked him, God's name, what does it all mean? Was she, or is she mad? Or what sort of horrible danger is it? I was so bewildered that I did not know what to say more. Van Helsing put out his hand and took the paper, saying, Do not trouble yourself about it now. Forget it for the present. You shall know and understand it all in good time, but it will be later. And now, what is it that you came to me to say? It brought me back to the fact that I was home myself again. I came to speak about the certificate of death. If we do not act properly and wisely, there may be an inquest. That paper would have had to have been produced. I am in hopes that we need no inquests, for if we had it, surely would kill poor Lucy, if nothing else. I know, and you know, and the other doctor who attended her knows, that Mrs. Westerna had a disease of the heart, and we can certify that she died of it. Let us fill up the certificate at once, and I shall take it myself to the registrar and go on to the undertaker. Good, oh my friend John, well thought of. Truly Miss Lucy, if she be sad in the foes that beset her, is at least happy in her friends that love her. 1, 2, 3, all open their veins for her, besides one old man. And yes, I know, friend John, I am not blind. I love you all more for it. Now go. In the hall I met Quincy Morris, with a telegram for Arthur telling him that Mrs. Westerna was dead, that Lucy had also been ill, and that was going to be better, and that Van Helsing and I were with her. I told him where I was going, and he hurried me out, but I was going said, When you come back, Jack, may I have 2 words with you and ourselves? I nodded in reply and went out. I found no difficulty about the registration and arranged for the local undertaker to come up that evening and measure her for a coffin and make arrangements. When I got back, Quincy was waiting for me. I told him I would see him as soon as I knew about Lucy, and went up to her room. She was still sleeping, and the professor seemingly had not moved from his seat at her side. From putting his finger to his lips, I gathered that he expected her not to wake before long, and was afraid of forestalling nature. So I went down to Quincy and took him into the breakfast room where the blinds were not drawn down. and which was a little more cheerful or less cheerless than the other rooms. When we were alone, he said to me, "Jack Seward, I don't want to shove myself in anywhere where I've got no right to be, but this is no ordinary case. You know I loved that girl and wanted to marry her, but although that's all past and gone, I can't help but feeling anxious about her all the same. What is it that's wrong with her? The Dutchman, and a fine old fellow he is, I can see that said the time you two came into the room that you must have another transfusion of blood, and that both of you were exhausted. And now I know how well you medical men speak in camera, and that a man must not expect to know what the consult about in private. But this is no common matter, and whatever it is, I have done my part. Is that not so?" "That's so," I said, and he went on. "I take it that both you and Van Helsing have already done what I did today. Is that not so?" "That's so. And I guess Art was in on it too. When I saw him 4 days ago down at his own place, he looked rather queer. I have not seen anything pulled down that quick since I was on the Pampas, and had a mare that I was fond of go to the grass, all in the night. One of those big bats they call vampires had got in her at night, and, what with his gorge and the vein left open, there wasn't enough blood in her to let her stand up, and I had to put a bullet through her as she lay. Jack, if you tell me without betraying confidence that Arthur was the first, is that not so?" As he spoke, the poor fellow looked terribly anxious. He was in torture of suspense regarding the woman he loved, but his utter ignorance of the terrible mystery which seemed to surround her intensified his pain. His very heart was bleeding, and it took all the manhood in him, and there was a royal lot of it, too, to keep him from breaking down. I paused before answering, for I felt that I must not betray anything which the professor wished to keep secret, but already knew so much, guessed so much, that there could be no reason for not answering. So I answered in the same phrase, "That's so." "And how long has this been going on?" "About 10 days." "10 days? Then I guess, Jack Stewart, that poor pretty creature that we all love had put into her veins within the time of blood of 4 strong men. Man alive, her whole body wouldn't hold it." Then coming close to me, he spoke in a fierce half-whisper. "What took it out?" I shook my head. "That," I said, "is the crux. Van Helsing is simply frantic about it, and I'm at wit's end. I can't even hazard a guess. There's been a series of little circumstances which have thrown out all calculations to Lucy improperly watched, but all these shall not occur again. Here we stay until all well, or ill." Quincy held out his hand. "Count me in," he said. "You and the Dutchman will tell me what to do, and I'll do it." When she broke late in the evening, Lucy's first movement was to feel at her breast, and, to my surprise, produce the paper which Van Helsing had given me to read. Careful Professor had replaced it where it had come from, lest not waking she should be alarmed. Rather than lit on Van Helsing and me too, gladdened. Then she looked around the room, and seeing where she was, shuddered. She gave a loud cry and put the poor thin hands before her pale face. We both understood what that meant, that she had realized to her full that she had realized the full of her mother's death. So we tried what we could to comfort her. Doubtless sympathy eased her somewhat, but she was very low in thought and spirit, and wept silently and weakly for a very long time. We told her that either or both of us would now remain with her at all times, and that seemed to comfort her. Towards dusk she fell into a doze. Here a very odd thing occurred. While still asleep, she took the paper from her breast and tore it in two. Van Helsing stepped over and took the pieces from her. All the same, however, she went with the action of tearing, as though the material were still in her hands. Finally, she lifted her hands and opened them as though scattering the fragments. Van Helsing seemed surprised, and his brows gathered as if in thought, but said nothing. 19th of September. All last night she slept fitfully, but always afraid to sleep. Something weaker when she woke from it. The professor and I took it in turns to watch, and we never left her for a moment unattended. Quincy Moore said nothing about his intention, but I knew that all night long he patrolled around and around the house. When day came, its searching light showed the ravages of poor Lucy's strength. She was hardly able to turn her head, and the little nourishment which she could take in seemed to do her no good. At times she slept, and both Van Helsing and I noticed a difference in her, between sleeping and waking. While she slept, she looked stronger, although more haggard, and her breathing was softer. Her mouth opened and showed pale gums drawn back from her teeth, and thus looked positively longer and sharper than usual. When she woke from the softness, her eyes evidently changed to expression, for she looked her own self, although a dying one. In the afternoon, she asked for Arthur, and we telegraphed for him. Quincy went off to meet him at the station. When he arrived, it was nearly 6 o'clock, and the sun was setting full and warm. The red glow streamed through the window and gave more color to the pale cheeks. When he saw her, Arthur was simply choking with emotion, and none of us could speak. In the hours that passed, the fits of sleep and the comatose condition that passed for it had grown more frequently, so that the conversation was possible were shortened. Arthur's presence, however, seemed to act as a stimulant. She rallied a little and spoke to him more brightly than she had done since we arrived. He, too, pulled himself together, and spoke as cheerily as he could, so the best was made of everything. It was now nearly 1 o'clock, and he and Van Helsing were sitting with her. I am to relieve them in a quarter of an hour, and I am entering Lucy's phonograph. Until 6 o'clock, there to try to rest. I fear that tomorrow will end our watching, for the shock has been too great. Poor child cannot rally. God help us all. Letter, Mina Harker to Lucy Westerina, unopened by her. 17th September. My dearest Lucy, it seems an age since I heard from you, or indeed since I wrote. You will pardon me, I know, for all my faults when you have read all my budgets of news. Well, I got my husband back all right. When you arrived at Exeter, there was a carriage waiting for us, and in it, though he had an attack of gout, Mr. Hawkins. He took us back to his own house, where there were rooms for us all nice and comfortable, and we dined together. After dinner, Mr. Hawkins asked, My dears, I want to drink to your health and prosperity, and every blessing attends you both. I know you both from children, and have, with love and pride, seen you grow up. Now I want to make your home here with me. I have left to me neither chick nor child. All are gone, and in my will, I have left you everything. I cried. Dear Lucy, as Jonathan and the old man clasped hands, our evening was a very, very happy one. So here we are, installed in this beautiful old house, and from both my bedroom and the drawing room I can see the great elms of the cathedral close, with their great black stems standing out against the old yellow stone of the cathedral. And I hear the rooks overhead cawing and chattering and gossiping all day, after the manner of rooks. And humans. I am busy, I need not tell you, arranging things in housekeeping. Jonathan and Mr. Hawkins are busy all day, for now that Jonathan is a partner, Mr. Hawkins wants to tell him about all the clients. How is your dear mother doing on? I wish I could run up to town for a day and see you. But I dare not go yet. With so much on my shoulders, and Jonathan wants looking after still. He is beginning to put some flesh on his bones again, but he was terribly weakened by the long illness. Even now he sometimes starts out of his sleep in a sudden way and awakes all trembling, till I can coax him back to his usual placidity. However, thank God, these occasions grow less frequent as the days go on, and they will in time pass away altogether, I trust. And now I have told you my news, let me ask yours. When are you to be married, and where? And who is to perform the ceremony? And what are you to wear? And is it to be public or a private wedding? Tell me all about it, dear. Tell me all about everything, for there is nothing which interests you which will not be dear to me. Jonathan asked me to send his respectful duty, but I do not think that is good enough for the junior partner of an important firm of Hawkins and Harker. And so, as you love me, and he loves you, and I love you with all the moods and tenses of the verb, I send you simply his love instead. Goodbye, my dearest Lucy, and all blessings on you. Yours, Mina Harker. Report from Patrick Hennessy, MD, MRCS, LKQ, CPI, etc., etc., to John Stewart, MD. 20 September. My dear sir, in accordance with your wishes, I enclose a report of the conditions of everything left in my charge. With regard to patient Renfield, there is more to say. He has had another outbreak, which might have had a dreadful ending, but which, as it fortunately happened, was attended with an unhappy results. This afternoon, a carrier's cart with 2 men made a call at the empty house where grounds about on yours, the house to which, you will remember, a patient twice ran away. An EB raid. Hey, EB. Where was I? The men stopped at our gate to ask the porter their way, as they were strangers. I was myself looking out of the study window, having a smoke after dinner, and saw one of them come up to the house. As he passed the window of Renfield's room, the patient began to rate himself from within, and called him all foul names he could lay his tongue on. The man, who seemed a decent enough fellow, contented himself by telling him to shut up for a foul-mouthed beggar, whereupon our man accused him of robbing him and wanting to murder, and said that he would hinder him if he were to swing for it. And I opened the window and signed to the man not to notice, and he contented himself after looking the place over and making his mind as to what kind of place he had gotten, saying by, Lord bless you, sir, I wouldn't mind what he said to me if it weren't a bloomin' madhouse. I pity you and the governor for having to live in the house next to a wild beast like that. Then he asked the way civilly enough, and I told him where the gate to the empty house was. He went away, followed by threats and curses of revelings of our man. I went down to see if I could make out any cause for his anger, since he is usually such a well-behaved man, and except his violent fits, nothing of the kind had ever occurred. I found him, to my astonishment, quite composed and most genial in his manner. I tried to get him to talk of the incident, but he blandly asked me questions as to what I meant, and led me to believe that he was completely oblivious of the affair. It was, I am sorry to say, however, only another instance of his cunning, for within half an hour I heard of him again. This time he had broken out through the window of his own room, and was running down the avenue. I called to the attendants to follow me, and ran after him, for I feared that he was intent on some mischief. My fear was justified when I saw the same cart which had passed before coming down the road, having on it some great wooden boxes. The men were wiping their foreheads, and were flushed in the face, as if some violent exercise. Before I could get up to him, the patient rushed at them, and pulling one of them off the cart, he began to knock his head against the ground. If I had not seized him just at the moment, I believe he would have killed the man then and there. The other fellow jumped up and struck him over the head with the blunted end of his heavy whip. It was a terrible blow, but he did not seem to mind it, but seized him also, and strangled him with the 3 of us, pulling us to him to and fro as if we were kittens. You know I am no lightweight, and the others were both burly men. At first he was silent in his fighting, but as we began to master him, and the attendants were putting their restraint count on him, he began to shout. "I'll frustrate them! They shan't rob me! They shan't murder me by inches! I'll fight for my lord and master!" And all sorts of similar incoherent ravings. It was very considerable difficulty that they got him back to the house and put him in the padded room. One of the attendants, Hardy, had a broken finger. However, I set it all right, and he is going on well. The two carriers were at first loud in their threats and actions for damages, and promised to rain all the penalties of the law on us. Their threats were, however, mingled with a sort of indirect apology for defeating of the two of them with a feeble madman. They said that if it had not been the way of their strength had been spent in carrying the heavy boxes, the cart, that they would have made short work of him. They gave another reason for their defeats, the extraordinary state of drought to which they had been reduced by the dusty nature of their occupation, and the reprehensible distance from the scene of their labors of any place public entertainment. I quite understood their drift, and made a stiff glass of grog, or other more of the same, and with each a sovereign in hand, they made light of the attack, and swore that they would encounter a worse madman any day for the pleasure of meeting a bloomin' good bloke as your correspondent. I took their names and their addresses, in case they might be needed. They are as follows: Jack Smollett, of Dudding's Rents, King George's Road, Great Walsworth, and Thomas Snelling, Peter Parley's Row, Great Guide Court, Bernal Green. They are both in the employment of Harrison Sons, Moving and Shipping Company, Orange Masters Yard, Soho. I shall report to you any manner of interest occurring here, and shall wire you at once if there anything importance happens. Believe me, sir, yours faithfully, Patrick Hennessy. Hey, thanks for the follow, friend. Fred. Letter, Mina Harker to Lucy Westerina, unopened by her. 18th September.
My dearest Lucy, such a sad blow has befallen us. Mr. Hawkins has died very suddenly. Some may not think it so sad for us, but we both had come to so love him that it really seems as though we had lost a father. I never knew either father or mother, so that the dear old man's death is a real blow to me. Jonathan is greatly distressed. It is not only that he feels sorrow, deep sorrow, for the dear, good man who has befriended him all of his life, and now at the end has treated him as if his own son, and left him a fortune which to people of our modest bringing up wealth beyond dream of avarice. But Jonathan feels it on another account. He says the amount of responsibility which it puts on him makes him nervous. He begins to doubt himself. I try to cheer him up, and believe my belief in him helps him to have a belief in himself. But it is here that the grave shock that he expels tells upon him the most. Oh, it is too hard that sweet, simple, noble, strong nature such as his, a nature so enabled him by our dear good friend's aid to rise from clerk to master in a few years, should be so injured that the very essence of its strength is gone. Forgive me, dear, if I worry you with my troubles in the midst of your own happiness. But, Lucy dear, I must tell someone, for the strain of keeping up a brave and cheerful appearance to Jonathan tries me, and I have no one here that I can confide in. I dread coming up to London, as we must do on the day after tomorrow, for Mr. Hawkins' will left that he is to be buried in the grave with his father. As there are no relations at all, Jonathan will have to be chief mourner. I shall try to run over to see you, dearest, if only for a few minutes. Forgive my trouble, you. With your blessings, your loving, Mina Harker.
Okay. Dr. Seward's Diary, 20th September. Only resolution and habit can make me let me make an entry tonight. I am too miserable, too low-spirited, too sick of the world and all in it, including life itself, that I would not care if I heard this moment the flapping of wings of the angel of death. And he has been flapping those wings to some purpose of late. Lucy's mother and Arthur's father, and now... Let me get on with my work. I relieved Van Helsing of his watch over Lucy. We wanted Arthur to go rest also, but he refused at first. It was only when I told him that we should want him to help us during the day, that we must not all break down for the want of rest, lest Lucy should suffer, that he agreed to go. Van Helsing was very kind to him. "Come, my child," he said. "Come with me. You are sick and weak, and have much more sorrow and much mental pain, as well as attacks of your strength, that we know of. You must not be alone, for to be alone is to be full of fears and alarms. Come to the drawing room, where there is a big fire, and there are two sofas. You shall lie on one, and I on the other, and our sympathy will be comfort to each other, even though we do not speak, and even if we sleep." Arthur went off with them, and casting back a longing look at Lucy's face, which lay on her pillow, almost whiter than the lawn. She lay quite still, and I looked round the room to see all was as it should be. I could see the professor had carried out the room, as in the others, his purpose of using the garlic. The whole room, window sashes reeked with it, and around Lucy's neck, over the silk handkerchief which Van Helsing made her keep on, was a rough chaplet, with the same odorous flowers. Lucy was breathing somewhat seriously. Her face was at all its worst, where the open mouth showed the pale gums. Her teeth, in the dim, uncertain light, seemed longer and sharper than they had been in the morning. In particular, by some trick of the light, the canine teeth looked longer and sharper than the rest. I sat down by her, and presently she moved uneasily. At the same moment, there was a sort of dull flapping or buffeting at the window. I went over to it softly and peeped out by the corner of the blind. There was a full moonlight, and I could see that the noise was made by a great bat which wheeled around, doubtless attracted by the light, although so dim, and every now and again it struck the window with its wings. When I came back to my seat, I found that Lucy had slightly moved, and had torn away the garlic flowers from her throat. I replaced them as well as I could, and I sat watching her. Presently she woke, and I gave her food, as Van Helsing had prescribed. She took but a little, and that languidly. There did not seem to be with her now the unconscious struggle for life and strength that hitherto so marked her illness. It struck me as curious that the moment she became conscious she pressed the garlic flowers close to her. It was certainly odd that whenever she got into the lethargic state with the strenuous breathing, she put the flowers from her, but that when she waked she clutched them close. There was no possibility of making that mistake from about this, for in the long hours that followed she had many spells of sleeping and waking, and repeated both actions many times. At 6 o'clock Van Helsing came to relieve me. Arthur had then fallen into a doze, and he mercifully let him sleep on. When he saw Lucy's face, I could hear the hissing and draw of his breath, and he said to me in a sharp whisper, Drop the blind. I want the light. Then he bent down, and his face almost touched Lucy's, examining her carefully. He removed the flowers and lifted the silk handkerchief from her throat. As he did so, he started back. I could hear his ejaculation. Mein Gott! As it smothered in his throat. When I bent over and looked too, I noticed some queer chill came over me. The wounds on the throat had absolutely disappeared. For fully 5 minutes, Van Helsing stood looking at her, with his face at its sternest. Then he turned to me and said calmly, She is dying. It will not be long now. It will be much different, mark me, whether she dies conscious or in her sleep. Wake the poor boy and let him come and see the last. He trusts me, and we have promised him. I went to the dining room and waked him. He was dazed for a moment, but when he saw the sunlight streaming through the edges of the shutters, he thought he was late and expressed his fear. I assured him that Lucy was still asleep, but told him gently as I could that both Van Helsing and I feared that the end was near. He covered his face with his hands and slid down on his knees by the sofa, where he remained perhaps a minute, with his head buried, praying, whilst his shoulders shook with grief. I took him by the hand and raised him up. Come, I said, my dear old fellow, summon all your fortitude. It will be best and easiest for her. When we came into Lucy's room, I could see that Van Helsing had, with his usual forethought, been putting matters straight and making everything look as pleasing as possible. He had even brushed Lucy's hair, so that it lay on the pillow in its shiny ripples. When we came into the room, she opened her eyes, and seeing him, whispered softly,
Arthur, oh my love, I am so glad to see you have come.
He was stooped to kiss her when Van Helsing motioned him back. No, he whispered, not yet. Hold her hand. It will comfort her more. So Arthur took her hand and knelt beside her, and she looked her best, with all the soft lines matching the angelic beauty of her eyes. Then gradually her eyes closed, and she sank to sleep. For a little bit her breast heaved softly, as her breath came and went like a tired child. Then intensely there came a strange change which I had noticed in the night. Her breathing grew stertorous, her mouth opened, and the pale gums, drawn back, made the teeth look longer and sharper than before. In a sort of sleep-waking, vague, unconscious way she opened her eyes, which were now dull and hard at once, said in a soft, voluptuous tone, such as I had never heard from her lips.
Arthur, my love, I am so glad you have come. Kiss me.
Arthur bent eagerly over to kiss her, but in that instant Van Helsing, who, like me, had been startled by her voice, swooped upon him and, catching him by the neck with both hands, dragged him back away with a fury and strength which I had never thought he could have possessed, and actually hurled him almost across the room. Not for your life, he said. Not for your living soul and hers. And he stood between them like a lion at bay. Arthur was so taken aback that he did not for a moment know what to do or say, and before any impulse of violence could seize him he realized the place and the occasion. He stood silent, waiting. I kept my eyes fixed on Lucy, as did Van Helsing, and we saw a spasm as if rage flit like a shadow over her face. The sharp teeth clamped together, then her eyes closed, and she breathed heavily. Very shortly after, she opened her eyes with all their softness, and putting out her poor, pale, thin hand, took Van Helsing's great brown one, drawing it to her, and she kissed it.
My true friend,
She said in a faint voice, but with untellable pathos.
my true friend and his. Will guard him and give him peace.
I swear it, he said solemnly, kneeling beside her, holding up his hand as one who registers an oath. Then he turned to Arthur and said to him, Come, my child, take her hand in yours and kiss her on the forehead, and only once. Their eyes met instead of their lips, and so they parted. Lucy's eyes closed, and Van Helsing, who had been watching closely, took Arthur's arm and drew him away. Then Lucy's breathing became stertorous again, and all at once it ceased. It is all over, said Van Helsing. She is dead. I took Arthur by the arm and led him away to the drawing room, where he sat down and covered his face with his hands, sobbing in a way that nearly broke me down to see. I went back to the room and found Van Helsing looking at poor Lucy, and his face was sterner than ever. Some change had come over her body. Death had given back part of her beauty, for her brow and cheeks now recovered some of their flowing lines. Even the lips had lost their deadly pallor. It was as if the blood, no longer needed for the working of the heart, had gone to make the harshness of death as little rude as it might be. We thought her dying while she slept, and sleeping when she died. I stood beside Van Helsing and said, well, poor girl, there is peace for her at last. It is the end. He turned to me and said with a grave solemnity, Not so. Alas, not so. 'Tis only the beginning. When I asked him what he meant, he only shook his head and answered, We can do nothing as yet. Wait and see. And that ends chapter 12. And, yeah, Lucy has turned to the dark side. So, hope everyone had a good night. Glad I managed to make it through another 4 chapters. But, thank you all for the raids and new follows. That's cool. Thank you, Sleep. Let's say I have. That gets me. Oh, that's just about halfway through the book. Let's see, that's starting chapter 13. There are. How many chapters are in this book? 27 chapters. So, yeah, about halfway through. Ugh. Yeah, I say that. I think I have more fun doing all the voices than anything else. Ugh. And if you want to hear the rest of it, I do have it all on my YouTube channel. I pretty much. Why is that still up there? Really? Why is that stupid thing still in my chat? Uh, okay. I love when things carry over like that. That's one of the things I forgot to clear off when I was doing the editing. I think that showed when I was on the other screen, did it? Oh, well, I'll have to find out later. But anyway, halfway through Dracula. Before I did Dracula, I was doing Frankenstein on Thursday nights. On Fridays, I usually do fairy tales. So, what was on that I can raid? Let's see. Oh, it's always nice to see people around. As I said, this is usually my Thursday and Friday nights. Oh, Jessica's doing Callisto. But yeah, YouTube channel is that link where it says I keep. I need to update that address because they finally allowed the personalized ones. If I can type. Yeah, that address. That's where all my recordings end up. So, provided I typed it right. But yeah, since she's playing a space horror game, it sounds like a good person to read. So, let's see, did I type it right? Red message is not coming up. What the hell? I didn't do it. I love when these things cooperate. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, let's go raid Dusk and see if we can scare her mid horror game. So, yeah, thank everyone for coming in and thanks for the raids and thanks for the follow. Uh, look forward to seeing you around some more. So let's go rest Dusk. So have a good night and I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, yeah, while I'm thinking about it, I do have an attractive game next week. Wednesday I will be doing Werewolf the Apocalypse, where I'm letting chat actually choose the path we take because it's kind of a choose your own adventure. So yeah, so try to come for that too. That'd be fun. Anyway, yeah. Hope everyone has a good night, and let's go show Dusk some love. Have a good night. 5, 4, 3, 2.